What's up, YouTube? So before we get started with this video, on first take, they're going to be talking about, was Mike Tyson the scariest heavyweight boxer of all time? So let's see what they have to say about that.
Mike Tyson, that made him 34-0 after that knockout of Tubbs on the anniversary of this date in 1988. Was Mike Tyson the scariest heavyweight you'd ever seen?
The answer is, well, let me rephrase that a little bit. He was the scariest he was the scariest fighter, and I would even say athlete ever at that moment in time. Meaning not with everything we know now, but at that moment, the way he was perceived, there was no other athlete that inspired fear in his contemporary competitors and contemporary audience like Mike Tyson, Stephen A.
So I don't know if I could agree with that. With boxing, maybe I can say that, Mike Tyson was the scariest heavyweight boxer of all time, even though I could probably name a couple other guys. So Mike Tyson's name would definitely be in the mix. But as far as being an athlete in all other sports, I don't think so. So I would say Michael Jordan definitely put fear in the hearts of his peers. When he won his first championship in '91. So Mike Tyson was a little bit before Michael Jordan, even though Michael Jordan was doing it at UNC, won a championship. So as far as in football, I would say probably LT put fear in the hearts of his of his peers because of the work he put in. If you want to go to hockey, we can go Wayne Gretzky. That guy put in fear in the hearts of his peers because he's an absolute monster. So I could definitely go with Mike Tyson being the scariest heavyweight boxer of all time, if not being in the conversation. But overall, being an athlete, nah, I wouldn't say that. There's too many other guys out there that were balling out of control. So let's continue.
He came on the scene. He was 20 years old when he knocked out Trevor Berbick. Guys, the only way to last a distance back then were guys would just tie him up. And it's not just that he was dominant, that he won just about every round. It was the way he was knocking guys out. Remember how he hit Berbick with the left hook and Berbick tried to get up 3 times and he couldn't get up? Remember the right uppercut against Marvis Frazier? YouTube it, kids, but it's not for the faint of heart. You don't have a weak stomach. I mean, the way he was knocking guys out graphically was unlike anything else. But also, he was the guy that would have been favored at that point in time. I'm not saying the odds would have been right in retrospect, Stephen A. I'm talking about who was going to be the favorite against anyone. It was Mike Tyson. People just did not believe he could be beat back then.
So I know there's a lot of people today that are talking about boxing heavyweight championships and about Deontay Wilder, even though he just got beat by Tyson Fury, which there's some problems there. But people are saying that Deontay Wilder was the hardest puncher ever, which I don't know if I can quite give that to him. I would say probably Mike Tyson or George Forman. Probably Mike Tyson because, a smaller package, which makes it even more impressive that he's able to have more power. But if it was between Deontay Wilder and Mike Tyson, I think Mike Tyson would easily win because Mike Tyson he was a smart, technical fighter with excellent technique. So I think he would definitely beat Deontay Wilder because Deontay Wilder is pretty much, like I said, a one-trick pony. Though all you have to do is stay away from his right hand, and you should be good to go. But it's not like that with Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson had the power and the skill set to put in work and not just get by being a one-trick pony and only having one thing in his arsenal. So let's continue.
Max Kellerman, I got to tell you this. I mean, obviously, I'll defer to you with your boxing knowledge, the way you cover the sport exceptionally well, I might add. But I will tell you this. I never thought that Mike Tyson was the scariest, in his prime, the scariest fighter. The person that I thought about was George Forman. Remember, his first loss came against Muhammad Ali. I believe at that particular moment in time, he was like 40-0 or 41-0. It was one or the other with like 38 KOs. This dude, 40-0, right? It was 40-0?
40-0, 37 knockouts when he fought Ali.
40-0, 37 knockouts before he lost to Muhammad Ali. And remember how he knocked Joe Frazier upside his head when Joe Frazier literally tried to run away from him and knocked him at the top, knocked him upside his head to knock him out? Remember that? Remember what he did to Ken Norton? Remember what he did to a slew of guys? What about him against Ron Lyle and all of these guys? George Forman was absolutely spectacular. And it's a personal thing with me, Max, because I was a young kid when him and Ali fought in 1974. I'll never forget as long as I live. My father was actually crying because he was scared to death that Muhammad Ali was going to get killed. Not knocked out, killed.
Yeah, so I wouldn't throw your dad under the bus like that and say that he was crying for any reason. I just wouldn't do that. That's some things need to stay in house, and that's one of those things. So let's continue.
That's how vicious and violent George Foreman was. I know that Mike Tyson, with his speed, the uppercuts, his left hooks, I get all of that. I understand that.
And don't forget about Mike Tyson's defense too.
But when I look at Foreman and the power that existed in him with both hands and his knockout percentage as well, Max Kellerman, I got to tell you, I found George Foreman to be the scariest, not Mike Tyson.
Let's talk. First of all, Foreman's a great pick. The three that really scared the hell out of everyone were Sonny Liston first, then George Foreman, who was like an improvement on Sonny Liston, and then Mike Tyson.
Yep.
Okay, here's the thing about Foreman that you're talking about. It's not just that he was knocking people, it looked like their heads off. It's that those guys weren't Tony Tubbs and guys like that. It was Joe Frazier and Kenny Norton.
Yes.
Frazier had split two fights with Ali, 27 rounds, and it was like even up. And in fact, at that time, it only fought Ali once and had beaten him over 15 rounds. Kenny Norton had split two fights with Ali, 24 rounds, and Ali was lucky to win the second one, and he broke Ali's jaw, and Foreman knocked them both out in 2 rounds. Just walked through them. It was scary. So I hear you. Your dad's reaction, crying because he thought Ali was going to get killed, that was a lot of people's reactions. A lot of people. The reason we think of Ali the way we do now is because he beat Foreman. That was impossible. People still can't get over it. But Stephen A., here's the thing. Foreman was a 2-1 underdog when he fought Frazier for the title before he fought Ali. Like, in other words, the way he came up, he was devastating, but it wasn't like people couldn't imagine him getting beat. Even though he destroyed Frazier, he was the underdog going into that fight. Do you realize Mike Tyson wasn't the underdog in any fight until he fought Lennox Lewis, who was 6'5", 250, dominant heavyweight champion, and Tyson was way past his prime? That was the first time Tyson had been the underdog. So I'm not saying you're wrong. Foreman might have been greater. In retrospect, I'm saying at the time, contemporary audiences, when they watched Tyson, said, ain't no one beating this guy.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with that. Tyson was that, scary and that dominant. But at the same time, George Foreman is definitely in a conversation for being one of the scariest and heavy or hardest hitting boxers of all time. If you guys go back and look at some YouTube videos where George Foreman is training, watch him hit the heavy bag. I mean, he's absolutely pulverizing that thing. And just imagine that's what he did to Ali's ribs when Ali was doing a rope-a-dope. I mean, this guy, watch him, go back there and watch George Foreman hit that heavy bag. I mean, every time he hit that bag, it sounded like a little explosion. And he just put a little dent in that bag. That's how hard of a hitter George Foreman was. Now, the same thing with Mike Tyson. I think Mike Tyson had the power of George Foreman, except in a smaller build, in a smaller body. But definitely those two guys are in the running for being the scariest heavyweight boxers of all time. But I probably have to go with Mike Tyson because I'm a little bit biased because I'm a Mike Tyson type guy. So let's continue.
Yeah, but you know what? And listen, it wasn't always the case. But again, I'll ask you, we saw what he did to Trevor Berbick and Berbick trying to get up and, falling down. Pinkston, he went up against them. We get all of that. But, I mean, listen, I remember when we talk about tears, remember when they said that Michael Spinks was in the locker room crying because he had to come out to fight Mike Tyson. But he was just a blown-up heavyweight. He was really a light heavyweight, okay? But fighting at the heavyweight division because that's where the money was, and I think he got about $13 million for that particular fight. Razor Ruddock was a legitimate heavyweight, and boy, could he hit. And Tyson softened him up, obviously, at the tail end. If he hadn't gone through those wars with Mike Tyson on 2 occasions, all right, that was different. Frank Bruno had a glass jaw. We all know that. And so when you look at some of the caliber of fighters that Mike Tyson went against, it was listen, I'm not taking anything away from Iron Mike. He's Iron Mike, and we know how vicious he was. But when you look at the caliber of heavyweights that was fighting, when George Foreman was taking them out, I don't think that the competition that Mike Tyson went against was comparable to that, Max.
Yeah, but that's not Mike Tyson's fault for what, the heavyweight that were available for him to fight during that time period. You have no control over that. The people that he fought were the people put in front of him and the people that were available. So it's not his fault that there may have been better competition throughout the heavyweight divisions before he got there. So I don't know. Let's continue.
What do you say to that?
You're right. You're 100% right. From this distance, from where we are now, the answer would be George Forman at that time. I'm talking about when we were living through it. As that world was living through that era, what was it like? That, by the way, one day it's going to be hard to explain to kids like what it was like to live through the coronavirus and social distancing. It's like a different kind of experience. Or tragedies, different world events that occurred. Where were you when JFK was shot for one generation, when the Twin Towers came down for another? The point is to live through, not with the perspective of distance, but to live through it. What did it feel like? With the perspective of distance, you're so right.